So I'm going to talk about my mom today. My mother always says, when life gives you lessons, if you don't learn it the first time, it's going to come up and life is going to serve it back up to you twice as hard until you get it. And I usually laugh in her face and say, Mom, you're such a hippie. And I think to myself, oh, she's probably secretly right. And if there's one lesson that I keep learning, it's that my mom is usually right. So when I was in high school, I did the whole art kid thing. I had like paintbrushes in my hair and I was covered in paint and whatever. So when I was getting ready to graduate, my mom had the crazy idea that I should go to art school. And naturally I said, oh, no, I want to be an engineer. So it took 3 years of civil engineering before anyone said, you're like really bad at math and physics and like all general science. You're just like super not good at this. So I dropped out, I went to art school, and my mom was right again. She sat smugly on my shoulder as I cut my teeth as a freelancer. For every time that I thought to myself, you knew better, there was Meg Robichaud, sitting on my shoulder, saying that when life gives you lessons, if you don't learn it the first time, it'll hit you harder the next. And after a while, she kind of retired back to her hummus and her gardening and whatever else moms do when they're not being moms. Because I stopped repeating my mistakes. By the end of it, I was kind of a good freelancer. I mean, I started off as a really bad freelancer, but then I screwed up a bunch and I figured out my shit. I was kind of a good freelancer. Which is great, because then I could slide smoothly into my role at Shopify without all the embarrassment and tucking my tail between my legs of screwing up and figuring out my shit in front of all my peers. It doesn't work that way. You can't take all the things you learn as a successful freelancer and apply them to a leadership role in-house. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. All the times my mom was right, and I got to learn a lesson second time, moving from my life as a successful freelancer to an in-house leadership role at Shopify. So when I was freelancing, I was terrified that I would sell all my best ideas. For every new project, I thought, holy shit, this is like my very best thing I've ever made. That's pretty cool. And then just as I was about to hand it off, I'd have this like twinge. Like, should I be saving this for me? Like, should I be really selling the rights to this thing, to this guy, when I feel so connected to this? Shouldn't I take like a freaking pause before I hand it off? But those were the fears of a very naive, very new designer. And I continued to freelance and realized that I was supposed to feel connected to all the work that I was making. I realized, of course, it was the best work I made every time, because every time I started a new project, I started it a little bit smarter. And eventually, I got my head out of my butt and realized that it was the work and the constraints that the projects were giving me that were producing the very good work in the first place. And without it, I wouldn't have made it at all. So this is just a few examples of the work I was doing while I was freelancing. You guys like to look at that stuff. And it's so much more diverse than anything I could have made on my own. So when I went in-house, I was terrified that I would go stale. I imagined this future where I would be drawing in just one style and I would forget everything that I ever knew how to do. I saw it as black and white. Freelancing is where you go to grow because you have quantity, and then in-house you just have one. And who gets good just doing one thing? But obviously that was super wrong. Where freelance has quantity, in-house had depth. The thing that they have in common is that they forced me to go beyond what I was capable on my own. When you freelance, the constant is you. You make new work, but people come to you for the same reasons. They want to see something you've already made, and they want you to change it just enough that they can own it. All your successes are based on iterating off your past success. The thing that's pushing you are the new constraints. When you're in-house, the constant is the constraints. You deliver work that serves the same set of people and solves the same problems every single time. So you need to force yourself to come up with a solution that pushes you beyond your first or your second or your 100th. So these are some of the work we started doing with the early explorations inside of Shopify. I'm going to go really quick because my talk's really long. So as I settled into a new style, I started spending my time managing and writing, and hopefully some other stuff. But just decidedly less drawing, which is specifically the thing I was terrified of. Specifically the thing that was supposed to turn me from someone who was good at things to someone who used to be good at things. And I settled into a schedule that I had specifically announced to no one in particular that I would not fall for. And I realized once again that all my fears were unfounded. For every moment that I spent writing or managing or all the other things I was doing, I realized I had all this energy and willingness to set aside time to draw just for me, which is literally the first time since high school that I drew just because it made me feel better, because it was fun, and it was doing all the other things that gave me the space to work on these side projects. So these are just some of the work that I was doing on the side. I'm going to go quick again. But returning to the work that I was doing with Shopify, I think it would be naive to say that they weren't feeding into each other. The work I was doing on my spare time was making the work that I did with Shopify better, and the work I was doing with Shopify was making the work I did on my spare time better. So we started exploring styles outside of our illustration style as a priority within our team. We started by just fostering a culture where everyone is encouraged to work on the work that they actually feel like working on, because that's where you keep all your best work. And then we started prioritizing it inside of our team practices. So every 2 weeks, Ryan Coleman, I was really worried I'd forget to say his name, organizes a creative challenge inside of our team, where the only constant criteria is that you're not allowed to work on work for Shopify. And so these are some of the artwork that's come out of that. We consistently see that whatever we play with in creative brain time is what we call it, that everything we discover there feeds back into our illustration style, not just like literally in techniques, which it does, but also more figuratively in taking care of us. It keeps all of us from burning out, and it's every 2 weeks remind ourselves that we love our job, which sometimes we can forget. So the first lesson I have is creativity is not a limited resource. What I learned from freelance and in-house is that I'm afraid of the dumbest things. And when there's nothing to be afraid of, we make something up. Somewhere along the line, I convinced myself that creativity is a limited resource. Like, don't screw it up, because this might be the last time that you ever make something great. Chill. Creativity is always going to make its way back in. All you need to do is let it in when it comes around. It's probably not going to look like it used to. It's definitely not going to look like you expected, but it's always going to show up. So when I was freelancing, I thought it was my job to be mean to people who asked for free work. Like, I wasn't that worried about being scammed, whatever, but the design community is a very scary thing. Spec work is one thing. Being caught by design Twitter doing spec work is so much worse. I thought it was my responsibility to not just turn down the work that someone asked me to do, but to let them know that they had crossed us. Us, the united front of designers who do not work for free. So when I was approached to work for free, whatever the cause, I didn't hear it. All I heard was free work, and I took a stand. Even if I did agree, it was like I couldn't literally go on my artboard. I felt like I had to spend the least amount of effort and time possible on anything I worked for free to prove to literally no one that I wasn't participating in the evil free work. So a few years ago, I was approached by Inch to contribute a pin for free. And I was like, oh, work for free? I mean, I guess I can dig something up, but you know what you're doing here. Inch is an incredible company, a not-for-profit organization. I mean, they pick a charity or two every couple years. The one they have on right now is called Art with a Heart, an after-school program for at-risk youths to help build confidence through art. But I acted like they were the assholes. So this is what I gave them. I dug something up, and it's like solidly okay. So I saw Bob Ewing is the founder of Inch by Inch. I saw him speak a few years later. You know, why he started it, what kind of impact it had on his life, the impact it had on the people around him. I came face to face with what an asshole I had been. He talked about how grateful and how humbled he was that so many artists had contributed, and I felt like a total fraud to be counted among them. Everyone else who contributed because they believed in what he was doing, and they put their whole heart into it. And I stuck my nose up and said, well, I guess I can dig something up. I was really mad at the design community for making me believe that working for free was such an evil thing to do. I decided when I saw him speak that was the last time I was going to get wrapped up in whatever the design community is worked up about today. I decided I can actually work on whatever I feel like working on. I don't have to be afraid of 140 characters. So I got to contribute some more pins, and this is what it looks like when you actually give a shit. When I went in-house, I felt a similar responsibility to the Shopify illustrations. I mean, they made an illustration team so that I would join. The least I could do is make sure they don't suck. So the first thing I did was went around to the rest of Shopify and just introduced our team. I went office to office and talked about how to work with us and how to identify a good time how to identify when you should contact us and all the things that you needed to know about our team. And then in decidedly nicer, but no less certain terms, what pisses us off? I thought it was obvious why they hired, this is from our original usage guidelines. I thought it was obvious why they hired full-time illustrators and not the other illustrators. So I said, don't do this, don't do that, definitely don't do this. You probably can't do that, maybe you should just leave it to us. I thought it was my responsibility to let people know, like, no problem, it's fine this time, but also, like, I super didn't like it. And you could tell I didn't like it. I kind of wanted you to be able to tell I didn't like it. We're friendly, we're accommodating, we're helpful, but don't fuck with us. I thought it was the only way that I could maintain the quality that I had agreed to maintain. Make sure no one but the people on my team make the things, and then no bad things get made. People are gonna still make all the stuff. The only thing that I had accomplished by letting people know that I don't like it when they do the things is that they don't tell me when they do the things. Also, I'm pretty sure people are afraid of me, which is weird because I draw butts all day. There's a whole lot of not that story-worthy doubling down on the leave it to us attitude that we went through before we eventually figured it out. We realized it's no one's fault but our own if people don't know how to work with us. It's not nice try, but like next time, don't. It's holy shit, I'm so glad you decided to use illustration. How can I help? Full stop. If we didn't like how they worked with us, then we internalized that. Shift the responsibility of understanding how to work with us onto us. If there's a problem, it speaks to how effective we are at educating the rest of the UX team about what we do, and definitely not on the people who are trying just to work with us. So we opened up our team and moved all of our private practices into public practices for anyone with the interest to try. Where we had previously said, like, why did you try to draw that? Don't you know there's 4 full-time illustrators? Like, maybe leave it to the experts? We just said, hell yeah. Here's our approval process, reviews are Tuesday, team meets every Friday. Here's our private channel, book me anytime. But just like, if you want to illustrate, don't try to do our job halfway. Like, you gotta go the whole way, otherwise that's just kind of rude. And I mean, like, the counter argument here is straight up, not everyone can draw, which is fair. I mean, we trained to do it the same way other people trained to code. But if I pretend for a minute that I didn't know that I just opened up my team because I think everybody should try to draw, we have so many upsides. I stopped having to hunt down all the illustrations that people were hiding from us. Everybody just brings them to us now, and then we get to just help them. We're no longer a service team or a black box. We're just a resource. We pulled our tiny little team out from being an island to something that has a community around it. And we found some really talented illustrators lurking in other corners of Shopify that we never would have been able to find because they didn't know how to try illustration. And the downsides? The only downside is that sometimes we have to help people who are bad at drawing be less bad at drawing. That's kind of fun. So when someone asks me for free work, or when someone just goes ahead and decides to do your job, it's super easy to get mad at them. easy to plant your feet down and cross your arms and say, no. But it turns out it really doesn't accomplish much. Instead, if you internalize the red flags and move everything over onto your turf with an emphatic hell yeah and some selective hearing. Free work? I love free work. What's the charity? You made what? I love helping illustrators. Reviews are Tuesday. You have so little to gain when you put the walls up, and so much to gain when you just invite everyone in. No, I cut that part. But ask me about it. So if I could write a letter to my past self before going in-house, or my future self going to freelance again, I'd probably say something like this. Chill on the whole, what if I'm never gonna art again? You're gonna be fine. And the only people you should dig your feet in and cross your arms to are mansplainers. And you should probably call your mom. That's it.